Live from CNN London, this is Connect the World.
All right, that was Eric Swalwell, a Democratic representative. I want to bring in Bernard Whitman. He's a Democratic strategist and former pollster for President Bill Clinton. Thanks for being with us. Talk to us about this impeachment inquiry. We're going to be entering the public phase. Will it change things, do you think, politically for the president?
Well, first, let me give a shout out to all the veterans. It's Veterans Day in the U.S., so thank you for keeping us safe. And I think
and it's Remembrance Day here in Europe as well, November 11th.
So a shout out to all of those who've given their lives. I think it's a four-way test, honestly, Hal. I think that, number one, it's a test for Republicans and the GOP and Trump to see actually if they can take this process seriously. This is enshrined in the Constitution. It's not a witch hunt. It's one of our most sacred elements of the Constitution, reviewing whether a president committed high crimes and misdemeanors and should be thrown out of power. I mean, the fact that Donald Trump is saying that it's completely ridiculous is really an affront. And we just had a poll recently that showed 61% of Americans indicate that Trump has little to no respect for our democratic tradition. So I think that's going to be on display greatly.
Yeah, but how will it change things? The fact that we're seeing public testimony versus closed door, and now, of course, closed door testimony, the leaks that came from that, and the transcripts. Do you think it will have any impact politically on the president? Will it change things?
I think, honestly, his approval rating is already in the basement at 42%. Poll after poll after poll shows that a majority of the American people actually support the Democratic proceedings into impeachment and believe the president actually should be impeached and removed from office. I don't actually think, unfortunately, that the GOP is going to take a cue from this. I think they're set to go down with the ship. I think that ultimately Donald Trump will be impeached. I think, unfortunately, there's no one in the Senate like Barry Goldwater was in 1974 that can go to the White House and tell Donald Trump, look, the jig is up. The amazing thing about this, and it's really more than anything a test for our democracy, the amazing thing about this is it's not a quid pro quo. It's extortion, it's bribery, it's corruption of the highest order. A quid pro quo is common in international affairs, saying you've got to do this in order to get that. This, in this particular case, was digging up dirt on a political opponent and encouraging a foreign power to do just that. This is exactly what the Constitution warned against and exactly why we have a process like impeachment. Whether or not...
it's a political process, and what matters to Democrats such as yourself next year is that Donald Trump be beaten. However, and I don't have to explain this to you, it's not a universal suffrage system in the United States. National polls don't really matter. It's whether or not the president can beat a Democratic opponent in battleground and swing states. And so far, there's only one, Joe Biden, who is competitive against him. Every other Democratic candidate in all the polls loses against Donald Trump in key swing states. That is a big challenge for your party.
It is a big challenge for the party, but I think as public testimony, people are really going to start paying attention to this. And when they see the witnesses, I mean, we're talking about career diplomats that are saying, we actually thought that something was corrupt, something was wrong, something was greatly out of sync here. And I think, nationally, the president is about 10 to 15 points behind. And I think in key swing states, yes, we have some ground to make up, but I think the impeachment proceedings are going to be cast in sharp relief exactly the type of leader that Donald Trump is. And I think it's causing a lot of fair-minded Republicans and a fair number of middle-of-the-road independents and Democrats to really question whether they could possibly support a president who is engaged in blatant corruption and blatant extortion.
Let me ask you about what Nikki Haley said. She claims Donald Trump's former Secretary of State and his former Chief of Staff both told her to cooperate with them in order to undermine the president. Listen to what Nikki Haley told an interviewer over the weekend.
It should have been, go tell the president what your differences are and quit if you don't like what he's doing. But to undermine a president is really a very dangerous thing. And it goes against the Constitution, and it goes against what the American people want. And it was offensive.
So the former U.S. ambassador to the UN, Haley, essentially said that Kelly and Tillerson tried to recruit her to, quote, save the country. What do you make of that?
I think this is one of many reports you've seen. I mean, the anonymous... the person that wrote the anonymous book, that wrote the op-ed a few months ago that just came out with the book now, says the exact same thing. There's been so many reports that even Mike Pence was involved in discussions about whether or not to invoke the 25th Amendment. I think clearly Donald Trump recruited some good people around him, and they realized quite early on that the president was not acting within the law, not acting, frankly, within the security interests of the United States. I think at that point, it actually is a patriot that would go and say, you know what, let's try to rein this in, lest the president ultimately sacrifice the American people's interests for his own personal gains.
All right, Bernard Whitman, thanks very much for joining us. We really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.